During practice session.
Dang it.
I know Thursday night,
You mean
JJ that was, who runs that Project Canine, he knows U.S. Army veterans being a veteran of the game for the area.
There's no public comment,
Yes.
sign it.
I can't go.
Oh, that's
Just realized that.
It still
Unless
shows
you
during practice session.
Unless one of you guys want to do LTAC. Just kidding. Yeah.
Okay, well, it is now 6:01, but I'm calling this Lacey City Council work session to order. For the record, we have Councilmember Greenstein and Councilmember Dunning attending remotely, but all other council members are here presently at City Hall. I also want to acknowledge that we, the City of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian Tribe and the Squaxin Indian Tribe. With that, can I get a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as published.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Then that motion unanimously carries. We have an approved agenda. Next up on our agenda is public comment. Is there anyone wishing to address this council this evening? Seeing none, and we'll go into our next agenda item, which is the Visitor and Convention Bureau Destination Management Plan. Annette.
Okay, thank you. So, I'm not sure, whoever's doing it is doing it right. I was gonna
Great.
say I didn't know how to do it, but they did. So we are at the point where we're gonna be transitioning from planning to doing, which is always fun. We literally have our marching orders for a decade. That said, we do realize we're gonna be updating this plan on an annual basis. You'll be involved in that. But I wanted to kind of give you guys a deep dive before we go into next steps about like, why did we do this in the first place? I've had people ask me that numerous times. I think it's really important to understand that nobody would enter into a process like this for no good reason, because it is a tremendous amount of work with a lot of people involved. So I want you to know why we did it and what that process was. And some of it's going to be a little repetitive when I came and talked to you guys before, but it doesn't hurt to be reminded about what that process was, because as we're finding, the further we get out from it, the easier it is for folks to forget, which is shocking to me, because it was a lot, but it's important to know the context. We're going to talk about what we're going to do next, what our plans are moving forward, and how you guys can be involved if you want to. And with that said, why did we do this at all? You don't enter into projects like this unless there's some problems that you want to solve, because there would just be no reason to. When I started here in 2021, I found that my predecessor had entered into a contract with a company called MMGY. They're kind of industry standard consultants. They come in and they do these plans called DNext assessments. And they create a survey tool that has an insane number of questions that they ask, and they put it out to your community stakeholders. And they evaluate your destination and your program based on those variables. So when I came in 2021, that happened in 2016. And in 2021, there was to be a follow-up assessment to see if in the previous 5 years, what the work that was done between 2016 and 2021, did it move the needle according to the people who took the survey, of which you guys probably were some of the folks that completed that survey. And unfortunately, both in 2016 and in 2021, based on the variables they measured and the findings they got, we were found to be weak as a destination, and that we were found to be weak in terms of having community alignment. And that's not fun. It certainly wasn't fun for me to hear as a new person who moved here and went, what? What are you talking about? We're weak as a destination and weak with community alignment. But the more I kind of got into it, the more I saw, oh yes, we have some relationship issues. We got to go out and we got to, actually talk to the community. Not that we didn't talk to the community, but I was new. So it kind of gave me a Trojan horse to go out and say, we need to have some conversations and figure out how we're going to be more aligned. The reason why that alignment is so important is you cannot effectively grow and improve as a destination for visitors and residents unless you have your jurisdictional partners, your nonprofit partners, your private sector partners, all, at least as many as you can get, rowing in the same direction. So the destination master plan became a vehicle to force those conversations. Here is a framework where we are all going to work together, and we're going to have some honest conversations. We're going to look at data from the community. We're going to look at data from our visitors and talk about things that are maybe a little itchy and uncomfortable. I also found in those early years when I came in that we were kind of operating what I would consider a dated organizational model. Visitor bureaus back in the day really were just kind of an ad agency for your community. Mm-hmm. Your job was to hold out the megaphone and tell people all the great things that you have to offer and say, come visit us. However, in our community, we didn't so much have this issue, but there are many communities that did, where that megaphone was so loud that communities suffered because of so much visitation. We honestly have very balanced visitation, but that model for visitor bureaus really started changing back in around 2015, 2016, that said we have to have community alignment. We have to be working with our jurisdictional partners. We have to have our economic development partners, our chambers, schools, medical centers. They need to all be a part of the conversation, and there needs to be some type of framework to allow that to happen. And so again, the destination master plan was kind of a Trojan horse that said, all right, we're gonna create this process to make these conversations happen. And then the last reason of why we did it was that we were still looking at jobs losses from COVID. When we started this process, when I wrote the grant application, we were still down considerably in jobs. So those were all the reasons why we did it. So one of the first questions when I do this presentation that folks tend to ask are like, well, what were the variables that they looked at with the DNext assessment? What did they look at when they said you guys didn't have the best results? And I should clarify too, the findings from the DNext assessments aren't from the consultant. They're from the people who filled out the survey. And that's the same message that's important for you to hear about the destination master plan. Our findings are not the visitor bureau's personal beliefs. This is what our community and our visitors said, over 1,000 people who participated. But on the DNext assessment, they looked at findings based on all of these things. So our attractions, arts, culture, dining, outdoor rec, sports, festivals, conventions and meetings, accommodations, mobility and access, destination access, meaning getting to our destination, communication infrastructure, and then health and safety. And then when they looked at community alignment, they looked at what was the support system for businesses, community groups and resident support, government support, organizational governance, workforce development, hospitality culture, EDI, funding support, and supposed to be certainty. We cut off a Y there. Regional cooperation, sustainability and resilience, emergency preparedness, and economic development. So we have a baseline, and so we're planning to work from that. If you've been in presentations that I've done before, you're probably tired of this ugly slide, but it is my message that if I can just get our community to understand, it's probably the most important to me, is this slide shows where we can all plug in. People mistakenly think tourism is just about vacations. It's really not. That is one of the things that happens with tourism, but tourism is about creating quality of life and maintaining quality of life in the communities that we serve and operate. It doesn't make a difference if our visitors love something, if our residents hate it. We can't look at what is best for visitors until we know what's best for our community first. If you build a place that people want to visit, you're going to have a place that people want to live. If you have a place that people want to live, then you will have a place that people want to work. If you have a place that people want to work, you'll have a place where your residents and businesses will invest. And if you have a place that people have invested, of course you have a place that people want to visit. And the Visitor Bureau, how we can contribute to this is through those little processes on the bottom. We can do branding work. We can do place stewardship and investment. An example of that is if we know that our visitors really love the waterfront, they really love our biking trails, and they want to access them, but they need to not only have bikes rentable to them, they need to have kayaks rentable to them. They want to be able to go on a guided experience. They're not used to being in Puget Sound, so for them to just hop on a kayak in the Sound is a little daunting if you're from Jersey. So we can communicate with some of our findings to our nonprofit and jurisdictional partners and say, hey, let's figure out a way to, let's accommodate this, and it plugs into economic development. Obviously, we can do promotion and sales, but all of the rest of this is not us. Like, we're B2C communicators. We talk to individual people. Our Economic Development Council, our chambers of commerce, our jurisdictional partners, your Sarahs and Vanessas of the world and Wesleys, they're the folks that can do most of this. So we're here to share research, share our findings and whatever tools that we might have, and then you guys who are the experts in this can go forth and conquer and help accommodate like those examples of the folks that would really love to go on a boat tour, but you know, we've got Olympia Sailing Company. We don't have like Deception Pass boat tours like in Whidbey Island. I want us to. I'm just got to figure out how to do it. Also, really important slide. It is easy for folks to get a little scared because they're going to read through this beautiful tome of information and they're going to say, oh my gosh, there's all this stuff that it says that people want us to do. Like the community wants guided mountain biking. Like what? Like, and you're saying I should be the person that can help make this happen? There is no desire whatsoever for us to tell anybody to do anything. We are not trying to tell Lacey, well, they said they want this in Lacey, so you have to do it. Like, obviously, that is not how this is going to work. However, what I highly recommend everybody do, read the entire book, it's amazing. Find the things in there that are important to you, first of all. But then look through your program, look through the things that you're already prioritizing. What are the things that are already important to this council? And then see, is it also outlined and captured in the Destination Master Plan? If it is, you then can leverage the plan and say, hey, it's not just me over here that wants us to do this. We had over 1,000 people participate, and they also want to see this happen. So you can use this to help support your efforts to get future funding or resources for projects that are already important to you. Does that make sense? Okay. These are the folks that were involved from the get-go. We started this process not last June, but the June before. We started having monthly meetings in September. It's important to note that you will see only one vote in that mix that is VCB. That's me. Everybody else had an equal say in this process. So I've had some folks say, hey, well, the Visitor Bureau decided that this is, you know, how we're doing this. Why should we listen to this? This is the Visitor Bureau. This is not me telling you or the Visitor Bureau. This group made every decision by vote through a monthly meeting process. So it was as balanced as we could get. We tried to have each jurisdiction represented. We tried to have each tribe represented. We tried to have nonprofits, some like as mixed of a bag as we could. And we had some private sector as well. Is it perfect? No, but it was the best group that I could come up with that would give us balanced and honestly oppositional feedback, because you want to have people that are going to bring different perspectives. These are the multitude of processes that we went through in that period. We brought our consultant out. They did an initial site visit where we drove them around. We went to a different location every 15 to 30 minutes, 12 hours a day, 3 days in a row. And we went to the places that we thought were the best places, and we went to the places that we thought were maybe a little bit of a warts and all kind of places, because we wanted them to see the good things, and we wanted them to see the places that we had to improve. And then they had individual conversations with those stakeholders at that time. We then collected every public document that we could find, so comprehensive plans, strategic plans, economic development plans, transportation plans, unhoused housing plans, wastewater plans, like any plan that was published, we collected. We used AI to overlay them to try and pull out what were the things that were commonly found to be prioritized through all these different plans. What were the challenges that everybody was trying to address simultaneously, but maybe not necessarily together? It's that community alignment piece that we struggle with. We did this because we wanted to make sure that we didn't make recommendations that were counter to what everybody already wanted. We wanted to make sure that we're not replicating work, but that we are being consistent and supportive of the work that everybody is doing. We did every possible type of analysis you can think of. You can see up there, we've got a SWOT analysis, industry trends analysis, COVID impacts and consumer trends analysis, gaps, markets analysis. We did a visitor and resident survey that we had just south of 1,000 people complete, and it was like the longest, most unpleasant survey known to man, and that almost 1,000 people completed that. I was shocked by, and there was a lot of opportunity for open-ended feedback, and people really like to tell us what they think, and they did. We did comp set analyses, so we looked at markets that we thought were similar to ours to kind of see what they were doing, what was working for them that maybe we could borrow from. We looked at another kind of comp set audience, which is aspirational markets, where they have some things that we'd like to see us grow into. We did the same thing for organizations like ours to see, you know, how are the visitor bureaus in these other communities funded? How are their boards composed? Do they have electeds? Do they not? Are they required? Are they voting? Are they not? We looked at what their staffing levels were, what the positions were that they had. We brought the consultant back in, I think it was January. We did one-on-one meetings with industry stakeholders. We did industry focus groups with stakeholders, so 100 conversations took place at that time. We brought them back again and did a public forum so that residents that are not directly connected to the tourism industry could be made aware of what our planning process was and that they could contribute to it if they wanted to. We did a public visioning workshop series where stakeholders could contribute from throughout the county. And during this process, the steering committee was meeting every month and reviewing everything that the consultant was doing. We did also produce a market potential analysis that evaluated lodging and meeting space. And we did that kind of early on just because we knew we were going to start getting interest early on, which we did. And so that was put into the hands of some developers for some projects going forward. And then we got to the end where everything gets stitched together. We put a bow on it. The steering committee got to see all of the kind of final findings. There were 29 that you guys, I know, saw before when I came here before. And they got to prioritize what they thought at a high-level, county-wide approach, how those things could be implemented in a phased process. The last time I was here, we were talking about the difference between those priorities and what your priorities would be. So we captured each community's priorities in the plan as well, so that it was clear that we're not trying to say that this is what Lacey's should be. We know you guys have your own priorities, and we're okay with that, and we support that. So these were the things that came out for the broad kind of initial implementation. I'm not going to read them to you, but you can kind of look through them. And phase 2. And phase 3. So then my board met, we had our board retreat, it was an all-day shindig, and they looked at, this list over on the left is what the steering committee identified as the areas that the Visitor Bureau could lead these things. You'll note there's a whole lot more that we could not lead, so that we're gonna have to find folks that are gonna be passionate about those processes. But of that list that the steering committee said, you guys should lead these, they said, well, if everything's important, nothing's important. You have a handful of people working for you. You can't do all of these things right off the bat. So in orange, those are the things that my board said, I want you and your team to work on first this year. These should be your top priorities. And you can kind of see over on the right, that is a list of what you guys said was Lacey's prioritization of all the 29 findings. So you can kind of see where we have cross-pollination. It's important to note, just because those are the kind of first priorities that the board wants us to hop on, that doesn't mean that we're not supporting other work that's happening. Of course we are. Other key takeaways from that retreat, just for transparency, they said these are your marching orders in addition to UNET. You need to research tourism funding options, not just for our organization, but for the projects that are included. If we say we really want to see a covered sports facility, then we probably got to have, you know, our money where our mouth is. We need to be a good partner and say, what are some different funding options that might help support that, and try to help support, provide some resources as well. We are looking at the possibility of adding in a 501c3 to our organization. A lot of the work that is being recommended for us to do, we can't fund through tourism promotion area assessments or lodging taxes. Those have very specific uses. And we can't very well say, well, community, we asked you what you want, you told us, and sorry, we can't do it. That is where we are right now, but I think adding a layer of C3 might open some doors to different funding streams so that we're not pulling the same levers and expecting different results. We've been working with IANTA. I've worked with IANTA for over a decade. That's the American Indian and Alaska Native Tourism Association. We're members of theirs. I'm hoping to bring them out this year to do a sort of summit of sorts, but a tribal summit to bring our partners together. We should be doing better at promoting a regional tribal product. And right now, we don't have really tight relationships with all of the tribes. I've got really good relationships with 2 of the 3 and just haven't quite figured out that third piece, and it's making me crazy. So you can't make people return your phone calls, I have found. People frown upon that. So I think they might be a really good resource to help me better figure out how do we approach this so that we can do better by these groups. Going back to community alignment, the build and strengthen current partnerships, identifying new partnerships, doing a better job of being an active listener with our partners, making sure that we really understand our inventory of assets. I learn about things every day. I've only been here three years, and I still just learn all the time about things that I had no idea that existed. So we need to keep building on that. We need to be more communicative. We have to work harder for scarce resources. There's not a lot of money out there for visitor bureaus, so we have to be really targeted in what we do and advocate collectively and with one voice with our partners. So this is where things get more fun. In the books that I brought you, at the very back, I wish they weren't in the back. I wish they were in the front. That's where the case studies are. And that's where you can see examples of work that has come out of destination master plans in other communities and how they've benefited from these planning processes. So this first slide talks about a project in Colorado. They leveraged BID funding, Business Improvement District funding, to really reinvigorate one of their downtown spaces through placemaking. It really made me think of Midtown and how there's so much planning and momentum going on here with that. Maybe there are some supplemental revenue streams out there that we haven't thought about that could be used to benefit plans already in place. Dave & Buster's is referenced in a couple different cities, not just their kind of regular model, but their sports model, which is their, for smaller communities, I guess, updated business model that I know that there's interest here in bringing a Dave & Buster's or family-friendly activities, and I think that the market is ripe for it if the right property is found and the right case is put together to the right audience. And it doesn't have to be a Dave & Buster's, but I think Lacey has really hit the nail on the head with family activities at the rack. If you were able to take that demographic and now you're done, here's something else really fun that you can do for the next few days, and add on and make it a little family vacation. It would just add to what you already have. And then lastly, this is something, I know it's like everybody's worst nightmare. Let's recommend a study from a study. But one of the challenges I see in Thurston County, and not just Lacey, is that we have incredible sports resources, but we have incredibly constrained sports resources. And I think you can talk to a different person and get a different answer every day about what is our true availability and what is our true need. I really think at some point it would be very valuable for Thurston County to take a really good, clear, scientific look at our overall sports facility mix and really understand not only what we can do to best leverage what we have today, but really what should we pinpoint in a very finite way to plan for in the future. I'm sure you guys are already doing that for the city of Lacey, but I think on a county-wide basis, if we all kind of understood, we could all be more strategic about what we're doing. So our next steps are, because this finished in the middle of a fiscal year, we have to get through our mid-year budget adjustment and getting our budget approved for 2025, which I have one more presentation to do for the Board of County Commissioners. By the way, for me to get a budget approved, just so you know, it has to get approved through my Finance and Policy Committee, it then has to go to my Executive Committee, it then has to go to my board, then it has to go to my TPA Commission, and then it has to go to the County Commissioners. So when people ask, well, can you just do something different that's not in your budget or in your work plan mid-year? I'm just like, oh, I really can't. We have a little bit of discretion, but we have to be so careful with where those dollars are spent that we're doing what we said we were going to do, that it becomes hard. So that's why we kind of hit pause, said we're going to spend a few months just socializing the plan, making sure everybody knows what we did, why we did it, why we're moving in the direction that we are. And then we're going to transition in Q1 from having a steering committee that was just the folks on that slide to we're going to create a task force that we're going to invite all of the original folks that were in that committee. They can participate if they want. The only rule is that you have to either lead or support something. I don't want to waste anybody's time. If you want to say, yep, I want to be here to make sure that this aligns with what our jurisdiction is working on, and I'll share information and you can share information with me, great. But we're not going to limit it to that steering committee, because I know that we have a lot of folks that are very passionate and have a lot of skills and expertise that weren't in that steering committee. So we're going to open the doors at that point and say, hey, if you're interested in sports and you know about sports facilities, I feel like I'm looking at you back there, then you might want to come to, be a part of the task force, and you can represent. And that will start happening in Q1. And then we will also be, at that point, starting to execute on some of the deliverables that we've set up for ourselves coming out of the plan. You might have heard we decided to discontinue our CTA program earlier this year, which was like shocking to the community, but we just had to do that for a variety of reasons, just organizationally. But we are going to be, for example, bringing back, or not bringing back, we're going to be starting a new quarterly educational opportunity that will be something that folks don't have to pay for. It's going to be called Tourism Talks. We're going to have an educational focus. We want to make sure that whoever has an interest can come and doesn't have to not be able to be there because either they or their company or organization can't pay for it. We'll be integrating folks from the community to both not only attend but present at those conversations. So I think it's going to be a fun segue. We will come back to the concept of a tourism ambassador program probably in the next couple years, but we need to let the dust settle. We were working with a vendor that said, you may not start another ambassador program in the next year or two or else. So we're saying, okay, no problem. We will honor that, and we'll just try to work on our community alignment, and we'll come back to that. So that's just one example of one of the things that will come out of our part of the to-do list. Oh, and the last thing I didn't say is on the next steps. We are going to be amending the plan annually. So please do look at the things that matter to you. And if you find things in there, you're like, this really rubs me the wrong way. I feel really strongly that this should be this. I want to know, because we might just amend that for the next year's issue so that we're capturing things in a way that's consistent with folks' values, what's important to you. And that is what I have.
Does anyone have any questions? Councilmember?
2 questions. Has a community near us done something like a business improvement district? Like, I think it was maybe Asheville had done a BID, and it was very successful in the case study that you showed. That's question number 1. And question number 2, I'm just perplexed by equestrian sports being like specifically called out when no other sports have the same level of focus.
So I'm going to answer your first question first. Yes. So Seattle has, like, you cannot swing a cat without hitting a business improvement area. They fund a lot using that mechanism. Now, I will say other communities that I've talked to find it very clunky and cumbersome and don't like the mechanism. But yes, there are a lot of communities that leverage bids or BIAs. A whole other kettle of fish is a conversation we'll want to have about what is called the Tourism Improvement District, which is enabling legislation that's probably going to get introduced at session this year that is a big deal. It would potentially fund statewide tourism for Washington in a way that it hasn't ever seen. And if that were to be written in such a way, it could be something that could be leveraged by other communities. So there's some really important stuff coming down the runway in terms of funding mechanisms. So I'm the president of the WSDMO, our trade organization for tourism boards, and I'm the vice president of our state tourism office. So I'm in it to understand what is going on so that we can try to make sure that we have a seat at the table and that we can leverage those resources when the time comes. To your other question, on equestrian tourism, I think everybody has had that same kind of response of like, wow, this is weirdly specific. And it is because it is such an untapped but rapidly growing aspect of our market. What's happening in the South County is pretty wild. And actually, it's not just the South County. It's more visible in the South County as you see Tenino Ranch growing. The county has been really working on the Violet Prairie kind of area down there between Grand Mound and Tenino. And what's that? Mm-hmm. And the folks that have Tenino Ranch, if you go out there and see what is happening, they're bringing in hundreds and thousands of people down there. Lacey and Olympia and Tumwater and our other communities all have really significant equestrian tourism amenities, but it's so niche that if you're not in it, you don't necessarily see it. So I happen to be in it because I'm a horse girl and I drive a big truck. And I pay exorbitant amounts of money for my ponies. But it is a sector that really could grow into something meaningful, and it is definitely happening in the South County. And it's going to be even more and more with the Ag Park coming to fruition down in the same little area. So it's just because it's new and could have big impact. And it is having big impact in the south part of the county. Yeah.
Anyone else?
I think the thing I like about it most is it taps into some of the economic spots, or should I say holes, that we have, monies that leave the community, because we don't have those types of attractions and or things to do. And so I think we lose out on some dollars because we spent so much time, trying to have the anchor stores and the staple businesses to pay the bills and get the utilities, keep them on, and all those types of things, that we haven't really had the opportunity or chance to do anything outside of parks. I mean, our parks are fantastic, and everybody knows it. But when people want to spend entertainment dollars, they go to another place. Unfortunately, they leave Thurston County. So thank you for putting this together.
Yeah.
Councilmember Downey?
Yeah, obviously, being part of this process, just wanted to kind of explain in the simplest way that kind of relates to me, what all this means, and really feel like with the Destination Master Plan, it's still kind of in the crawl phase. We just finished it and narrowed down to those 5 really important things, and now those are kind of getting put together. And now we, as the city of Lacey or Olympia or all the different stakeholders, can then start putting input and see how we can actually make effective recommendations and effective change for the entire Destination Master Plan, as well as, the things that the EDC can be, most effective at, or other organizations. But really now it's when the work of the VCB can start, because they've identified what the priorities are. So now we can actually start working together a lot better on making sure that this actually comes out to be effective.
Anyone else?
If I can just add in a little bit of a plug. I got to participate early on in this process when I was on the VCB board a while ago. And what's really nice about this process, because in the past it's always been about just advertising or promoting, but not really looking at the system or structure that when people come to a place for recreation or tourism, what keeps them there? What keeps them there that extra day? And it's really, if when you travel, you go someplace to probably take in the sights or do to an event, but you also notice that, oh, this is a cool little neighborhood. This is a place I could, could I ever move here? Those type of things and those amenities. And this really is tying all that together so that we're not only identifying those type of activities and uses that would draw people here, but what are those things that will keep them the extra few days, and the other amenities that support that effort as well. So it ties it all together, and again, it pulls us into a kind of a comprehensive approach and identifying where those, as it's been said before, those various partners and stakeholders' roles in trying to create that atmosphere or that ecosystem. So I think it's been really nice to see this finished product. Again, I was there at the very beginning, but had to step away from the work, and I'm glad to see it's coming full fruition.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be done with the planning phase and very excited to get into the let's do things phase. Although it's really hard when you don't have the fiscal resources to do the things. So I'll just be chasing people around, being like, hey, somebody out there can bring these projects to life. I firmly believe if you show people the data, because our organization, that is I don't ever want somebody to wonder why we're doing what we're doing. It's because we have data to tell us why we're, what our focus should be. And I think if you show people, here's the demand. If you talk to, whether it's Dave and Buster's or Top Golf or whatever the family-friendly thing is, they know what their requirements are. We know what their volume thresholds are that they want to hit. Let's look at the tools that we have and figure out where we line up, and then figure out who is the person who goes and talks to that company, who are the private sector partners, and make it happen. And just kind of pick some very specific, that one's easy for me to say because it's very specific. But there are other things that we could do that are in the exact same vein. And that's the way I see us working. Yes, we're still gonna run ads. We're still gonna do all the things that a visitor bureau should do. But we wanna actually work on that experience that people have when they're here. And it's not just about the vacationers, because if our locals are not happy when they come to visit Great Aunt Opal is gonna give them an earful, and it's not gonna be pretty. So we want our locals happy. Yeah.
I think, what we've been waiting patiently for is, of course, some more hotel rooms, and also some of the, something that will attract some of the bigger activities, which, of course, leads us to the Quamuth Village and Quamuth Resorts. And so we know how important that can be. Not only have convention space, which we've never had here before, but to have a 300-room hotel, that's something, we don't have anything close to that now. And other possible hotels, and they're looking at the same sort of things that we're looking at right here to attract to their properties. So that is something that we're been very supportive of, and doing everything we can to hopefully see that be successful. But always the difficult part of this is if only the private sector would do this,
Oh, I know, and that is where we live.
Like, I mean,
all day long.
our
Yeah.
waterfront is really amazing, and you're right, there's no waterfront, very few waterfront activities. I mean, you can't go out and get be on a boat and have a meal at night at sunset. There's just, it doesn't.
I want to do that.
Yeah. So,
I would pay for that.
I mean, I
Yeah.
can do that, but I mean, a lot of people can't do that.
Right.
But so it's that is something that working with trying to figure out the private sector side of things.
I think
is
there's
always-
so many creative solutions that we haven't even started to talk about yet, though. Like, I know there are programs like where, I hate to talk about where I came here from, so we've piped down over there, Mr. Walk. Wenatchee's better than East Wenatchee, that's all I have to say. But I was on the Economic Development District Board there, and they had a really successful small business launch program. Like, how cool would it be if different organizations came together and we all said, we're all gonna throw some money at this, and we're gonna make a competition. We're gonna incentivize some key business areas. Say, we wanna have scenic boat rides, whatever the thing is, or we wanna have guided horseback rides, whatever the small gaps are where we know we have leakage, so to speak, where people are going to other communities. And what if there was a small business competition where you motivate people to write a really good business plan that can get funded and bring that thing to life? I think there's weird little things that we could do to try to reel in some private sector. Because you're right, I mean, that's like in visitor bureau land. If you're a nonprofit, I can't make somebody build a new hotel. But I can give you data all day long. And I think that's where the real influence can be, is if you get the right information in front of the right people. And that's why I like that slide where it had all the circles and where, the visitor bureau can do this little amount, but the vast majority is gonna be your economic development teams. It's gonna be the Economic Development Council. It's gonna be the Thurston Chamber and the Lacey Chamber and all the various programs where we just have to kind of be aligned to say, these are the things we really want. Who are you talking to? Because this is who we're talking to. And you need what information? Okay, give me 10 minutes. And then we can see what we can do.
Are you still doing trainings with like the local hoteliers on here are the restaurants, here's things to do when people are in town? Like, do you go in there and say, like, here's a list of attractions and things to do while you're in town?
So
to the local
I think what you're thinking about is the CTA program, and we discontinued that this year.
CTA program? Yeah.
Certified Tourism Ambassador Program. That said, after COVID, the hotel experience has changed a lot. When you go and you check in, most of the time you're doing express check-in now. You're not necessarily having that same experience that we did pre-COVID. That said, that need to provide that information to their front desk and to their, if they had concierge or to their housekeepers, whatever, still exists. And so that's on our radar and on our to-do list. Even if we aren't doing it through the CTA program, we need to put together a restaurant guide. Or for our legislative guests, say, here's a place where you can hold small to medium-sized meetings when you're here lobbying. We've got a new person on our team who's starting to do like a deep audit of all of our sports and meetings facilities to create updated meeting space guides for anybody who's interested in bringing, sports and or meetings to our area. Meetings is really hard though because of the obvious space issue. which, 3 to 5 years, we're all just gonna be hunky-dory, because we'll have all these beautiful new, properties. But between now and then, yeah, knock on that wood, between now and then, it's a bit of a wait, and so we're having to just be very scrappy and say, well, yes, we can put an event together between St. Martin's and like, we're stitching together some pretty interesting things, but you do, what you have to.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate it.
Yep, you are welcome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And next up is something that we hope to be a tourism destination, very, in the near future, the Greg Cuyo Park.
Well, thank you, council members, for the opportunity to present this update tonight. And let's see, it's nice to start out the day bright and early with a couple of you and finish it off tonight. So tonight I have Brett Bugard from Public Works Capital Projects team with me. Just want to thank Brett for all of his hard work and support on this project. Also, I want to note that all the photos in the slides were taken at the park. So tonight, just looking at the intended timeline, looking at some updated renderings. There's a public art consideration for the council, and then wanted to present an updated cost estimate. So intended timeline, here we are in Q4, closing in on 90% design, working our way to 100%, and then with going out to add by the end of this year is the intention, and try to, get as favorable bid prices as possible. And then in Q1 of 2025, starting construction with a tentative Phase 1A opening in Q3. And the reason we say tentative, there's a couple of anticipated challenges, but the intention is to get the park open to the public as soon as possible. We can compare it to the RAC parking lot project, which started at the beginning of this year, as soon as construction could start with some of the preliminary items, and then opening up that parking lot just as soon as possible to the public. And that contract is not actually closed out yet, still waiting for some of the equipment. But so that's kind of the same type of thing. We'll want to, get that open for the public just as soon as we possibly can. Anticipated challenges, long lead times for equipment, particularly playground equipment, lighting, et cetera. And then Public Works did inform that the legal requirements for apprenticeships have recently changed. City of Lacey currently is implementing this, but it will affect the city's ability to go out to add. It affects all projects over $2 million. So I'm excited to show some updated playground renderings tonight. You may recall the public weighed in on the theme of the playground, which is to represent nature. They really wanted that nature theme, and so you'll see that reflected in the renderings. Particularly here, there is, you see the big log there with the tree house on top. You'll see a lot of green. There's a log slide, and then we've got the hillside. We were able to put some amenities there on the hillside to utilize, to take advantage of that the slope there, the level differential. The swings are commonly requested and heavily used amenities, so there are a lot of swings. We've got for different ages and abilities. There's a featured companion swing there on the right. That's something that we don't have in our park system currently, so that's going to be exciting. And you did see a lot of green in those renderings, but if you take an aerial view, the synthetic turf surfacing that we're going to be using, there is a blue creek that runs through, and that's representative of Woodland Creek, which runs through the park. Here we see a rendering of the large shelter. It's a little bit dark on this slide, but it has a Hartford green roof. You can see the colors up there in the right corner, and the poles are actually shown in the picture as gray, but they'll be the black that you see up in the right corner. And then we have the signage package to share with you. And so the sign package highlights one of Lacey Parks Culture and Recreation's branded colors. It's called Ochre, and it's a warm goldenrod that pops amongst the green trees and the meadows of the park at a variety of distances. And so this kind of shows you what it'll look like. We looked at several of the different branded colors for Lacey Parks, and the green, we have green in our branding, but it just blended in, so it was nice to have something that was kind of colorful and that kind of popped because the space is so big. And this, so yeah, this gives you a feel for how it looks on site. And then we'll move into a public art consideration for the council. So this project is subject to ordinance 1022, which requires 1/4% of the estimate for city projects. That excludes transportation and utility projects. But if they're over 500,000 to be allocated to public art, that 1/4%. And so this project would require approximately $16,200 to in either installed art or the other option would be to transfer that amount into the city's art fund and to install art elsewhere in the city. But because of its scale and beauty, staff would like to propose the monument sign for Greg Keogh Park for dedication as public art. The sign fits in with the nature theme that the public had expressed, and then also going along with the main goal. One of the main goals of the project is passive use of natural space and preservation of open space. This sign was designed by EHDD Architecture. They're a subconsultant for the main landscape architect, which is HBB Landscape Architect. So they are the leads, and then EHDD is the sub that designed this sign. The sign will be located at the entrance of the park, highly visible from Carpenter Road, whether traveling north or south. So this sign is very different than the rest of the city's monument signs. It's unique and nods to the surrounding nature within the park, and with its use of the maple leaf and the salmon motif. They're presented as water jet cutouts on the main sign panel, and then in the large maple leaf side panels. So these motifs highlight the character of the park and serve as a linking thread throughout all of the signage, as I showed in the last slide. The sign utilizes that same ochre goldenrod color as mentioned. It's fabricated from fluoropolymer coated steel with all the steel galvanized prior to the coating. That's for added durability. All lettering and seals will be either metal pin mounted or direct welded to the central sign panel. The selection of materials were chosen for durability and ease of maintenance. The estimated cost of this monument sign is $82,000, which includes the sign, the concrete footings, and the in-ground lighting. So it'll actually be a sign that's also lighted. And so per the Lacey City Council policies and procedures, the council retains final authority on selection and placement of all art to be located on city-owned properties within Lacey. And so using art funds for the sign would satisfy the set-aside requirement, and in addition, it meets the city's adopted public art policy if the council would so choose. The sign does accomplish several of the public art policy objectives, creating a sense of community, identity, and character, provides a pleasing living, working, and playing environment, enhances economic development, and attracts visitors. We know that this site will be a place that people from around the region and even beyond will come. It provides sustainable maintenance and operation costs, and it evokes a sense of fun. In addition, the sign reflects several of the ideas and themes of the public art policy, which are the natural beauty of the city as reflected in its trees and lakes. So this does have tree incorporation with the leaves. Use of Northwest themes, so the salmon and the trees do that. The public art policy calls out park entry signs, so that's another reason it could fit in. Finally, the sign meets placement parameters by complementing or enhancing the following locations. It actually calls out Lacey Parks, trails, and publicly owned spaces. So tonight, staff is requesting council direction, whether to move forward with this or to go a different direction and identify another alternative to meet the ordinance. And then, in the future, come back to a city council meeting for action. I do have one more slide, so I was hoping maybe to finish the presentation and then come back, if that is okay with you. So we'll put a pin in that one. This last slide here is to update the council on the full project budget. This 90% estimate includes the total construction budget, plus the city's construction cost and the remaining design cost that you see down there in the second to the last line. So we don't see this budget changing as we move into 100% design here in the next couple of months. And then just a reminder, as you know, we'll be receiving $1 million in reimbursement due to grant funding from the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office and the Department of Commerce, reducing the city's cost by $1 million.
Can you remind us again what we're getting for this?
Yes.
We're obviously getting the playground.
Oh, yeah.
Are we building out how many trails? Are we, it's the disc
Yeah.
golf course as well?
Yes, absolutely. So Phase 1A consists of the park entryway, so the actual road into the park, and everything that's associated with that. 77 parking stalls, access to 2 miles of hard and soft surface trails, an 18-hole gold-level disc golf course, lots of open space, designated picnic areas, and then that large shelter that you saw, and then Phase 1A of the playground, which is the, that aerial footprint that I showed.
And that's signage.
And signage.
And the
around-
signage,
around
yeah,
property,
yep.
Including signage
Yep.
for the trail and for the disc golf course.
Yep. Yeah, and again, like I said, hopefully, as always, with favorable bid pricing, and then, hoping not to have to look at any cuts out of the project.
Has there any been discussion on, we all know Cuyo very well, right? But for some people, that's hard to pronounce. Have we ever thought about calling this like GCP and then calling it Great Cuyo Park? So at least we have something people can easier refer to. Obviously, we want to, if it wasn't for Greg Cuyo, we would have never had this property. He pulled out, it was amazing. But I'm just thinking, for people, like when you're trying, what are you doing today? I'm going to the Greg, if you call it GCP, and then when people see it, oh, it's Greg Cuyo Park, that's what it means. I don't know, I've been thinking about that for a bit, something that is something a lot easier for people to identify with. That's why.
The GCP, I like it. We do actually use acronyms, like for Woodland Creek Community Park,
I know it.
WCCP.
Yeah. So it would
Rainier
be-
Vista, RVCP,
Yeah, and so we do that already, it just like,
It's like the rack, say region.
the rack,
Yeah.
the rack, there you go.
I just think it would be, I think it would catch on pretty easy. And then, of course, when people come there, like Great Cuyo Park, that's what GCP stands for. But I've just been thinking about that for a bit.
Yeah,
Something
I
to
think it's a
consider.
great consideration, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, makes sense, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I support this 100%, the monument sign and everything, and all the great work Greg did and staff, past, present, and future. When it comes to the monument sign, though, I have to make sure the council and the community is aware that we did the Gold Star Memorial, and it was great and well-received, and people loved it, and, thanking families that lost a loved one in the service of our country is obviously a great thing. Recently formed is the Purple Heart Memorial, and they have aspirations of having a sign, a monument, much like the Gold Star, only at a fraction of the cost. Being a military community, this and that, I just can't, in my conscience, I can't, 1,000% support this without at least the council being aware that this is coming down the pipeline. You're talking like maybe $5,000 to $15,000 maybe for some funds to be matched by community, much like we did with the Gold Star, and that was $130,000 or $120,000. This is a fraction of that. It's you're looking at 30 or 40,000, and you're just looking at seed money. But even $5,000 is a lot of money when you're talking art and especially public funds.
Well, I think that we can have a future discussion about this. In this circumstance, we have to have money set aside specifically because we're going over the 500. And it makes sense then that art goes back to this location using that same dollars. I'm totally for that. I think what we're bringing up here is something I've been talking to the city manager about, and I know it's coming forward here pretty quick, is what are we doing with our art dollars?
Yeah.
And what's the best way to spend those dollars? And that's a conversation that's coming up here pretty quick, right, Rick?
Well, it'll probably be towards the end of this year because of everything else we have scheduled in the between with a couple of our joint meetings and budget. But that is correct. It can look at bringing the art plan back to council, also with the art policies that Jen referenced, and have a conversation of going into next year, how do you want to strategize those art dollars. Now, there's a couple of things, and Shannon reminded me of this earlier, is, there's a capital larger project, but we're also already implementing some of those art plans with like the community wraps and some other projects that we've been doing slowly. But then, again, what do we do with the overarching plan and when we have a community request and make those decisions and prioritize some of those strategies?
But I want to make it clear, though, I support this 100%. This is just more informative that this is coming down the line, and, it's, in lack of better terms, it's like, would we put money into a monument sign for a school in a park, but not, so it may not make sense, but it makes sense to me. I just had it in good faith, make sure that the council and the community know that's aware, and it's coming down the pipeline.
Well, I'm in support of this outline. I think it makes a lot of sense. And of course, we're very excited about it moving forward. I'd love to see it dedicated next year for sure. Does anyone have any concerns? Go ahead.
I have a couple of concerns. One with the leaves that are coming out of the monument sign. It looks dangerous to me. I mean, if a kid tried to climb on it, and it seems like it's just asking for trouble with injuries there. Has there been some discussion about that?
It's not, yes, there was discussion about it. It's not something that was seen as a hazard. It's gone through, our projects team, our architects team. Did you have a comment about it?
Well, yeah, so it's not like it's right next to a sidewalk and it's away from the playground. So it's at the entry drive of the park, and it's kind of set back enough that you shouldn't have people passing by right there on foot every minute. And so it's set back.
What will that be made of?
That's a good point.
The leaf?
It's sheet metal as well. That's water jet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, it just, it looks inviting to climb on. And
Yeah.
trying to think like a little kid here. The other thing, and I was having a conversation with Rick a little earlier, and he pulled up the sign, and I kind of reacted to the ochre or brown leaves, thinking, it's like green would be so much better to my way of thinking. And then I saw you've got that on signs throughout the park, and I understand I need to have things pop a little bit, but brown suggests dead leaves to me, and it's kind of a dead feeling, and I'm just wondering if there could be, who chose the colors, and if there could be a little more consideration about that.
Yeah, so we, do you want to share so we went with the branded colors for Lacey Parks, and I'll show you. So it's interesting you say brown, because brown is one of our colors, the second one over, and then this is the ochre is the next one over. So we did look at the brown actually as one of the options, and it was not preferred, but this one just popped a lot more. So, whoops, it's going crazy on me here. Hold on one sec. Oh, let me go back. So these are our primary branded colors, and looking at these, the parks green just blended too much, and the aquatics blue didn't quite make sense for this location. This was just kind of part of the discussions with the design team. Mm-hmm. And so we looked at these secondary colors, and we actually, I think they showed us, I want to say they showed us the teal, the gold, the ochre, and the brown. So kind of those middle ones diagonally there. And that was just the consensus of the group was, the ochre as far as the colors popping. The yellow didn't look quite right. The brown wasn't quite right either. So it's kind of just to help you with the process that we went through. And then staff provided some pictures. We wanted something that was kind of modern looking, but also was unique. And so we gave them these as just examples. And then this is the one that really stood out as a clear preference, and that's the one that ended up kind of, they patterned it kind of after this, but obviously designed a different look, so. This one shows more you can kind of see the 3D a little better in this picture, but this isn't the final one because we have the city of Lacey. It's actually taller and thinner now, but this is an earlier rendering. But anyway, just to kind
Well,
of
and
show you a little bit more about the
Those are maple leaves,
process.
and maple leaves are orange-ish, so I'm partial to orange. Go look at my car. But I think it looks great.
And it's almost fall, right? And, I mean, when the leaves start changing color, I think it's gonna just add to the ambiance.
Fall is one, leaves are orange for one season, a very short part of the year. And, I don't know, I just question the choice, but
So-
one vote.
So that is the way it'll be positioned, that you can see it from, it is both sides. I wasn't sure if that was
Yes.
clear.
It
that
is
was
both, it's both sides. This isn't the final position, this just shows what it would look like. It's not as close to the road in the plans as it looks.
And it's a pretty good stretch of road, so if you miss a turn, you're gonna be going for a while before you can turn back around.
So then also.
Hesitated to show this one because it wasn't the final, but this shows a better 3D picture of it, so that's why I wanted to show it.
So in lieu of this sign, and this cost already being baked in, you want to forego the quarter point to the reserve? Is that what I heard? Is that what I'm to understand? So
Well, this one is, so this sign is in the budget, there's already funding allocated for it. And so, it would check the box, if you will, of public art and also the monument sign. However, if council chooses not to dedicate this as public art, then the 1/4% of funding would need to be put in reserves to the public art fund.
And using art in other locations or back in the site as well.
So is that the direction?
Different piece of art.
Is that the direction you're asking for tonight?
Yes,
Yeah.
we're looking at what council thinks, if that's a direction you want to go to, look at this sign as meeting that public art requirement, and then we would bring it back. If so, we'd bring it back to council at a future council meeting for action.
100% chance my kids are gonna climb on that when it's built. But why would we not have more art? Sounds like we've already got money to pay for this, and we're proposing to like double count this as art so that we don't put art somewhere else. Why would we do that?
It's just a suggestion because it is such a unique and kind of, I don't know if majestic is the right word, it's a substantial.
It's beautiful, and I think it is art, but we could have this and something else, right? We have the funding.
Just presenting an efficient, fiscally responsible option.
So 1/4% of the 6.5 is $16,407 that we would not put in the art reserve in lieu of this sign.
And that would go to partially pay for this sign, because that sign's gonna be a lot more than $16,000.
It's like 85,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, 85.
So I guess my question is that we're talking about the entire budget, not minus the 1 million. So we are talking about the entire 6.5 that we would take a
Yes,
quarter point
correct,
out.
which the 1/4 of the 1%, yeah.
If you're looking for direction, I like it. I'd say bring it to future.
Councilmember Green.
Councilmember Greenstein?
Yeah, I gotta say, I think the sign looks great. I think we definitely should consider that art. I mean, that sign is very different than anything else I've seen in the city. I think that makes good sense to use that $16,000 toward that sign. I mean, the parks, project that I've been super excited about since the beginning of this, but, $85,000 is a lot of money for a sign. So any part of it that we can use from other pieces, I think makes sense.
I mean, for me, it's either this sign or other art within Great Cuyo Park, because that's why we're collecting the money, is for there to be art for the project.
Completely agree with you on that, Andy.
Yeah, I just can't imagine, matter of fact, I hate it when that happens. It's like, we are collecting money, but then we're gonna put it into another account and spend it someplace else. I mean, it should be spent right there at Great Cuyo Park. That's the purpose of why we put that in there, because we want to see art in our bigger projects. So it should either stay in Great Cuyo Park with a different art, or it should go to the sign. And I think it makes sense to go to the sign too.
I agree with that. Just questioning a little bit
Okay.
on the design and colors.
I think we got a majority of people who want
coming
to
back.
move forward.
For consideration at a council meeting. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Great.
much.
So next up is our revenue and expenditure estimates. Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council. What you have before you tonight is a report that previously went to the Finance Committee.
Yep.
And happy to be before the full council with this information. This is a statutorily required step of our budget. We did comply with that by going to the Finance Committee. So this is a step that we have to provide the council or the legislative body with some preliminary revenue numbers for the ensuing year. We have to do this by the first Monday in October, so we're going to be well ahead of that. So we're going to focus a lot of the conversation tonight on the general fund. I'll touch a little bit on some of our other funds, but again, primary focus on the general fund. I do want to start by setting the tone a little bit. This slide here is a couple excerpts from our budget message that we sent out to the organization back in May. Thankfully, not much has changed. Actually, unfortunately, things haven't changed. So really our message was we didn't expect a lot of growth in revenue. At the same time, we expected significant increases within labor. And unfortunately, both of those are still holding true today. So jumping right into the revenue estimates, we can't talk about general fund revenues without talking about sales tax. It is our single largest source of revenue for the general fund. Our 2025 projection is $19.3 million. This is an increase of about $2.2 million, but of course the majority of that increase comes from the recently voter-approved public safety tax. So about $2.1 million of the 2.2 increase is coming from that sales tax. At this stage in the budget, sales tax makes up about 31.6% of all revenues. That number is definitely going to come down because we're going to suggest that we use reserves to help balance our budget and help us pay for one-time projects. So that number is going to decrease as we add those revenues to the entire budget. You get this information, of course, from me monthly, but I do want to share it with the public and any of our staff that might be watching. Really, we're looking at trends. That's what sales tax is about, trends and trying to guess what's going to happen going forward. So when we look at the last 12 months, so this goes back to July of last year, retail trade, this is by far our biggest category of sales tax. Over this 12-month period, we'd had less than a 1% increase, 0.7%. During the same period, construction increased 7.2%. A little bit different story when you look at the year-to-date, so this is really just January through August. Retail trade is showing an increase of 1.5%, and construction is actually down almost 0.5%, 0.4%. So looking at what has happened to sales tax, this is a month-to-month comparison. So what you're seeing here is January 2024 as an example compared to January 2023. You can see we started off the year quite strong. January and February in this model actually represents sales activity that took place in November and December. So we're 2 months behind in our sales tax receipts. March was another good month, and then things have steadily decreased. April was about a 1.4% increase. May was essentially zero, less than a 0.1% increase. And then we've been below last year's collections in June, July, and August. So unfortunately, our current trend is one that is showing that sales tax is decreasing compared to last year. I want to talk about property tax, another significant source of revenues for the general fund. The 2025 projection at this point is about $9.1 million. This is an increase of about $302,000. This increase is primarily made up from new construction, so these are assessed valuations that get added to the tax rolls. Doesn't impact the existing property owners. This is simply new tax base. We had a great year in terms of adding assessed valuation, $294 million at this point.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure this number will change, but it will be very close to this number here. In terms of perspective, last year we added $176 million. 2023 we added just over $176 million.
So this is our record number for new construction, yet, right?
Not quite. We had 2007, 2008, we exceeded 300 million, but this is
pretty darn close, right?
Yeah, this was a surprise for me for sure.
Yeah, but we haven't seen that then play out on the sales tax side of things.
Well, that's why I think you saw construction. You're not seeing it in the current numbers.
Yeah. Is it because the sales? Is it because is there a lag there? Like
there is, and there's a timing issue.
Yeah.
So you could see if you go back 12 months, construction increased 7.2%. So that goes back to July. That basically covers the 2023 construction season. This number here. So when you look at this is simply from January this year forward.
Yeah.
So,
so we captured the big stuff that happened last year that now it's coming on the rolls this year.
correct. And I think the cutoff for the Thurston County Assessor is August. So any construction that happens after August 1st goes into the next year. So it's actually about 14, 16 months behind rather than 1 year. So I think that contributes to that too. So we had a lot of commercial industrial on development in Northeast Lacey. We had a lot of multifamily, but that's definitely trailing off now. So I think we're seeing a lag effect here.
Okay. That's what I was trying to, it's like, wait a minute, something's not making sense here.
Yeah, a year isn't a year in this case.
Okay.
So for the property tax amount, was this completed prior to the 2025 assessments that the assessor sent out just recently, or is this is just reflecting?
No, it should include the current assessment, which a lot of us got in the mail here recently.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
So,
and that's where our 301 increase is coming from.
correct. In fact, valuation went up citywide, so existing property is about 6.2%. So last year, of course, we had the first decrease in 10, maybe 11 years. So, we're certainly seeing an increase in property values again. I think, we've heard that anecdotally nationwide that real estate continues to climb. So
then what is the city assessment as a whole on the new?
Right now, it's 13.2 billion. We've never exceeded 13 billion. We hit 12.2 or something like that 2 years ago, I think. So we just barely got over that 12 billion number here in the last couple of years. But, when you take 6% of that 12 billion, that gets you 750,000. And then you add the new construction of 294,000, it gets you to 13 billion.
Wow.
So we're going to see the levy rate again decrease. As you know, it's an inverse relationship between assessed valuation goes up, the levy rate goes down. So we're going to see our levy rate go down again in 2025.
Do we have an idea what that's going to be?
Last time
You were going to ask that as soon as I
Okay.
say.
I was pretty spot on, I just want to say. But
I think it's 69 cents, 69.2 cents, something like that. We were at 72.
Yeah.
So
That's crazy. I mean, what that sort of tells me is that we don't have enough debt. I mean, how in the world?
well, that's separate from debt.
Well, I know, but to a degree. But if you bonded some things, it would add to it. It's amazing that we're providing every service that the city does for 69 cents. I mean,
Well, and
you can't,
as we're going through this presentation tonight, they'll also be talking about how do we get some, look at more resources and options to look at the AV.
16, that is just, is there another city in anywhere that has a levy rate that?
There isn't here close by, but there is. I know that Shannon at one point had looked that up in a meeting, and I can't remember the city, but we definitely had a city that was in that. We weren't the lowest.
Oh, wow.
I want to say it was like Central Washington somewhere that had even a lower rate than us.
Yeah, well, it has zero yeah. I mean, yeah. Huh.
But it's still a challenge when you look, and you'll see that in the following slides when we get to the expenditure side. Expenditures are still growing faster than revenues, and I do think it's amazing, and it's something to be proud of that we have such a low rate, but you apply that rate to the 294 million, and it ends up being smaller than a city that has a higher rate, because it's that rate times that, and so we get a smaller increase. So that increase for us is only about 200,000.
That's crazy.
This projection does include the 1% increase. The unofficial inflation number that we use for property tax is 2.6%. That'll be finalized, I think, in October, but we're definitely going to be over the 1% inflation number. Looking at some of our other significant sources of revenue for the general fund, utility taxes, we're projecting a $358,000 increase. Seeing the most significant increases in the city-owned utilities, water, sewer, stormwater, because we do have significant rate increases there. Growth is also a factor in terms of that consumption. B&O tax, we're projecting just over $4 million for 2025. This is an increase of about $194,000. Admission tax, actually, we're projecting a decrease of $30,000. The year-end projection for 2024 is going to be right at that $150,000, so about $30,000 less than we projected. Really, again, just as a reminder, we've talked about just the change in behavior and movie entertainment. A lot of us are streaming more often than actually going to the movie theaters. A lot of movies come out directly on streaming the same day they come out in the theaters, so that's definitely been an impact on this industry. Gambling tax, we're projecting no change, so about $541,000 projected. This has been an area of growth, or at least it was in 2023 as we were coming out of the pandemic restrictions. Pre-pandemic, it had been a long while since we had broken $400,000 in gambling tax.
So I think it's worth having a conversation about, does it make sense that the city is mandating a monopoly when it comes to our gambling taxes in the city of Lacey? That has never sat well with me, and I think especially as we're looking at sort of the future, where does Lacey position itself as other things are expected to come online with, in our area. I think it's a conversation needs to be had is, do we lift the ban on new card houses? And, what would we feel comfortable with having that number be? Yeah. But I'm no longer, I haven't been comfortable for a long time that we were mandating a monopoly when it comes to this. It just doesn't, it's never set well with me. And I think we need to have a conversation about it.
And you're somewhat foreshadowing the later part of this presentation too, is talking about what do we need to do going forward with looking at our projected revenues and our expenditures. And those are one of the options. If you remember from the retreat, we talked about, had a brainstorming session about different types of revenue options. What the mayor just said is one thing to consider. also in terms of gambling taxes. It's been some time when originally the gambling tax was around 10%, and the previous councils lowered it because of recession and issues with cash flow, and to 7.5%. And there's sometimes you can look at reconsidering those rates as well as several other options that has to do with revenue from taxes to other fees and those type of things, and to take a look at it holistically going forward.
Yep.
Why do we have a prohibition on card houses?
There was, gosh, I
Happened
want to
like
say it was
before
back
us.
in 2002, 2003, there were some changes at the state law level that allowed more opportunities for card rooms, and there was a concern of over-proliferation, and so there was a lot of cities enacted ordinances that would prohibit them. The one card room we did was able to get their application vested before the council made that prohibition. And that's why we have the one card room currently.
So we wanted to make sure we didn't have too many, and we went from 0 to 1.
Right.
And that's where we've stayed for the last
Yeah, and then we
12 years.
implemented that they're grandfathered in, but no one else could come.
Well, and it used to be a higher rate because the recession hit,
Yeah.
and they were
Yep.
locally owned, and they're gonna go out of business, so did we lose that revenue
Yeah.
entirely? Or did we scale it down and, I don't
Yep.
know.
So the original tax rate for gambling was 10%. Council reduced it right after the 2008 recession to 7.5%. And again, looking at cities across the state and what they assess for a gambling tax, we can take a look at that as well and see what is something.
It was actually a little later than 2008. They came to the council in like 2012 or something like that.
Is that something that we would talk about as part of our comprehensive plan, community engagement strategy? Like checking in with community on what they want?
It would be a part of a land use discussion, as well as, again, you also want to take a look at what are the positive effects of that and what are some of the negative effects, and make sure that councils will inform what those decisions would look like.
Did you say that 7.5%?
Yes.
Okay. Parks and Recreation fees, very slight changes to that area. This is an area that's, continuing to recover from the pandemic, but we're getting very close to our pre-pandemic numbers in 2019, as you can see. I have another slide to follow this one, but our general fund interest revenue is projected to decrease 21%. Have a couple of different factors. We're using large portions of our cash reserve for the police station, so that's about a 17% reduction to our principal amount, as well as we're fully expecting rate decreases starting actually next week and then going forward. So kind of both going in the wrong direction in terms of principal and expected interest rates.
So have we, the city, ever seen a $3 million? Where did we have this last year?
It was at 2.6.
That's had to be a record, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see it right here, actually. So, what you see here is a 10-year snapshot of our interest revenues. This is the entire city portfolio, so this goes beyond just the general fund. The general fund is in the dark blue, outlined in red there at the bottom column there. But I alluded to this during the mid-year report. In 2014, citywide, we earned about $207,000 of interest. The general fund was $53,400. Fast forward to last year, we had $7.1 million in total city investment income, with about 2.2 of that being the general fund. That is an increase of, at least for the general fund, about 41 times higher than 2014. That's largely a function of the interest rate.
Yeah.
The interest rate you see in the yellow line there, and with the axis on the right, we're earning basically nothing, 0.1%, in some cases 0.08%. The overnight rate right now is like 5.4%, so it's like 50 times higher, 54 times higher than it was. So certainly a major difference in coming from the interest rate. But again, we expect this interest rate to come down. What that exit target is for the end of 2025 is really a guess. I've seen as low as 3%. Again, we're at 5.4 today, so a 2.5% roughly decrease might only be as low as 4%. Right now the projection is at 4%, but we'll see.
I'm curious, what did you project our interest income to be in 2023?
It is.
What did you project it to be before the actuals? I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
No, I've got that information. I just had to get the right page.
Yeah, I bet you it was not anywhere close to that high.
Yeah, so it's the 1.3. We're currently at 1.6. We earned 2.3 in 23, but you might remember this time last year, I was saying the same thing. We thought interest rates were going down.
Yeah.
And then December, January, February, inflation went up unexpectedly, so we didn't have any rate decreases. In fact, we haven't had a rate change since, I think, July of 2023. So we were basically in the same projection going forward, talking about potentially a 2.5% or the rate increase itself going from 5.5% down to 3%.
So this is like money in the bank that we did not think we were going to have.
Yeah, for sure. So great news for 23, great news for 24. Definitely expecting a decrease in 25. Certainly we are spending down reserves. So between GCP, Great Cougar Park, and sorry, gotta get used to that, Mayor.
Hey, it's catching on.
Between those reserves as well as the police station, that's about a 20% reduction to our total reserves. So I mean, that's definitely going to have an impact as well. Do you want to remind council? Council did take action on multi-year rates for our utilities, water, sewer, stormwater. So no action is necessary for 2025, but as a reminder to the council and the public, we have a 5.25% increase for water, 9.5% rate increase for sewer, and 4.5% for stormwater. You still will have a water comp plan coming before you. We are starting the process of both the wastewater and the stormwater comp plans as we speak.
I brought this up to our city manager, but the $2.2 million that we're going to receive here shortly from our water sale, right, was $2.2 million we weren't expecting to receive when we did our water rate study last time. And so built into this annual increases of 5.25 doesn't take into account that we just received $2.2 million. We're about to receive $2.2 million. And so what I'd like to see is either we take that into account into our water rates and readjust our water rates, or we put that aside in a restricted fund to help with our rates going forward. And so one way or the other, we came up with this rate not knowing we're going to have $2.2 million. Now that we have $2.2 million, there has to be some benefit back to the ratepayers, in my opinion.
Sure. And if I can just add a little bit of history, I did do some checking, and back in 2009 is when we purchased our share of the brewery water field, and we purchased it for $1.5 million roughly. And so that came out of the water utility reserves at that time, that wasn't anticipated to pay that. But also too, as the mayor said, it happened so long ago that it wasn't considered in the current rates. And of course, as Troy mentioned, we're going to be going back and bringing a water plan forward, and also eventually doing another rate study to look at that.
I'm just saying, hey, either as we're doing the rate study, there's this dollars that are coming in to help with our, it should help our ratepayers one way or the other, either, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's pieces to that rate study too that we're taking into account, projected construction costs of adding on to the system. And we also need to take a look at how inflation treated that, and do we have, that's the other piece of it too. Because if we look at that in concert with the rates, we got to take in also future construction costs and inflation.
I understand that. I'm just saying, we need to put that into our projections, right?
Yeah, and it'll happen automatically. When we look at rates, a big part of that is the reserve, so that will go back into reserves. There are 100 factors that go into a rate study, but, we've talked about in the past collecting additional revenues higher than projection because of a conservative growth rate, as an example. You and I've had lots of conversations about that. But all that goes into the fund and it stays in the fund. That's the nature of having an enterprise fund. So any additional cash or any additional revenues that occur, that in a sense automatically buys down future rates the next time we go to do a rate study. We're just taking a snapshot in time. So the better our financial condition going into that period of study will automatically do that. If you're asking for something, in a shorter timeline in 2027, we could certainly take a look at that, but, these rates, the 5.25%, the 9.5% increases for sewer, you might remember in 2021, we did a special out-of-cycle revenue analysis. We had a consultant put that together for us. And, yeah, things are a lot different than they were in 2021, both, especially in terms of inflation. When we, had high inflation for just general purchasing, the construction index was much higher than that. So my guess is of that 2.2 million, we saw increases in inflation in our projections to projects higher than that. So certainly we want to look at it from a global standpoint.
Obviously, I would love to have that information, right? And because this has always been my concern with doing multi-year increases, because things can change from year to year so drastically, whether it's inflation, whether $2.2 million coming in for a sale or wherever. And for me, what I always see is that our increase in population has been skyrocketing. And this is why I've always said it's like, but what we use as that factor is not even close to what the reality is. And it's never been close to the reality for all the years I've been on council. And so, yeah, that's all going into it. I just would like to, check in to see what the reality is.
Sure. No, I appreciate the thoughtfulness on the unexpected cash, for sure. So looking at the other side of the budget, do want to give you some highlights on what we're expecting there. We have to talk about the cost of labor. We've all talked about the importance of staff, definitely our most important asset, but certainly an expensive one. We do have two major contracts that will be expiring at the end of the year, so we have a little bit of an unknown going forward. So our Ask Me contract expires at the end of this year. The last increase for 2024 was based on the Seattle CPI-W. Just for your information, that factor currently for this year is about 4.2% if we end up, somewhere close to that in terms of negotiations. The other labor group that is not under contract for next year is our Police Management Association. In 2024, the increase for this group was 4.5%, so it wasn't based on inflation. But again, these are two areas that we have a little bit of uncertainty going forward. We do have two contracts that are settled for 2025. In fact, our Police Guild is settled through 2026. The Police Guild contract is 100% of CPI-W from June to June. That factor this year is 3.6%, so we're going to see a 3.6% increase to Police Guild salaries. The Police Senior Management Association, also under contract through 2026. They use a slightly different factor. It's 100% of CPI-U, June to June. That factor was slightly higher than the CPI-W, so that number is 3.8%. So 3.8% increase for this labor group.
What's the difference between W and U?
U is all urban workers, so it covers, I think, 90% of the workforce. W is more blue collar, covers, it's like 20%, 30%. It's a much smaller sample, so it's a little more volatile than CPI-U.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes.
When do we negotiate the 2 contracts that expire at the end of this year? Are we in bargaining now?
We just are kicking off the bargaining right now.
Okay.
So also associated with the cost of labor is benefits. We got indication that the PERS rate is going to go down slightly. It's currently, well, actually, I think we changed September 1st. So it was 9.53%. It is now 9.11%, so a slight decrease. No change for LEF contribution, so it remains at 5.32% of salaries. We have a range for medical insurance. It's between 7 and 10% for both Regents employees as well as Kaiser. Dental, Washington Dental projection for increase is 0 to 4%. Willamette Dental between 6 and 9%. No increase for vision, and we have not had an announcement on workers' comp yet, so that is pending. But again, significant increases in benefit rates.
I had a quick question on that last slide. So when PERS rates goes down and the salary goes up, do we calculate the delta?
We do. We take a snapshot of our payroll and we make adjustments from that snapshot. So we know what the employee is currently making, we know how many dependents the employee has, and it's all calculated within this.
So that we can have like an effective increase as opposed to an actual, or an effective increase as opposed to the 2% or the 2.4, whatever is contractually agreed to. We can actually know that number.
We get as close as possible when we project salaries and benefits. I'm sorry?
For those increases that we know are coming, like when you're building in how much that 9.11 is going to cost us, it builds in the 4.5 and the 2 and all that stuff, so that in a year and a half, you know how much the change is going to be.
Absolutely. Yep. So what does that really mean in terms of dollars and in terms of the 2025 budget? Significant increases, we expected them. So just for the general fund, we have a 7.1% increase for salaries. That's about $2.1 million increase. Benefits, the increase is 15.2%, coming in at just under 1.5%. Some things to note about the significant increases. This is full year salaries and benefits for the new positions that are being funded by the public safety sales tax. We only have a partial year. We had a couple other mid-year changes that to our salaries and benefits at 24. There will be full year impacts in 25. So, but you know, overall,
Part of that's going to be paid for through the sales stuff.
But still a significant increase. Yeah. Overall, so when you add in our internal service funds, you add in our utility funds, you know, kind of a similar impact there. Significant increase, 6.2% for salaries, coming in at just under 2.4 citywide. Benefits 12.8% or 1.7 million. So overall, salaries and benefits are projected to go up about $4.1 million. You saw a version of this slide during the mid-year report. I was really focusing on the first half of the year since we were talking about a mid-year report, but here's a 10-year history of our increases to salaries and benefits. For 2016 through 2023, those are actual expenditures, so those are actual increases. You could see the dollars are the columns in the red and blue, so, and then the percent change from year to year is the yellow line, and the axis is there on the right. So we've almost doubled our salary and benefits during the 10-year period covering through 2025 projected budget. About $22.6 million in salaries and benefits in 2016. We're projected at $43.1 million in 2025. Our average increase over this period, annual increase, is 7.1%. That does include 2 budget projected numbers. So, but if you just look at the 8-year actuals from 2016 through 2023, it's about a 6.3% annual increase. So we're not too far off of what we're seeing for historical.
Are those bumps in the yellow line bargaining years, or the year after a bargaining year when a new contract goes into effect?
No. One is a retro pay. So we had retro pay in 2022, I think. Maybe it's 23. It's probably more representative of additional staff. So we had added double-digit numbers of staff in a couple of these years. So it's probably as much as that as anything. Yeah.
Has the relationship between salaries to benefits changed? I can't tell just by looking at the colors, but I would guess that benefits is a larger proportion of total compensation now than it was 10 years ago.
It is. I can't recall. I think we're closer to, 7% per year increases to benefits and 5% for salaries. I mean, it's definitely a little bit higher for benefits. I mean, you just think about what's happening in the insurance industry. And
Healthcare is getting more expensive. Yeah.
absolutely. And whereas salaries follows a much closer line to inflation, and we've also had upper level caps on COLAs. So when inflation was 9.5%, we weren't paying 9.5% COLAs. We also talked about this at the mid-year report, the percentage of actual budget spent. You could see during the pandemic years, we, like many other industries and other governments, we just had trouble filling positions. We at times had near 40 vacant positions. We're closer to 12, 15 vacant positions currently. So, hats off to our HR department for getting those positions filled, but rather than saving 15% a year on salary and benefit budget, we're now spending over 97%, so we're only saving 2.5%. So we're definitely much closer to that budget number.
But we can use those savings in the past to help offset some of our budget downfall, or shortfalls now, right?
Yeah, and we're using those for one-time capital. I mean, a lot of the police funding from the general fund is coming from savings like this. We saw significant savings. In fact, in 2022, we almost saved $5 million in salaries and benefits. So we've been trying to utilize those towards one-time projects rather than funding ongoing expenditures. Do want to highlight some of the more significant initiatives that we are expecting in 2025. You'll get an in-depth list at our budget workshop that's scheduled for the 24th of this month. But we obviously have the police station project, our largest priority right now. This is a little bit of a dated number, this $24.3 million, but we're still refining the amount we're going to spend in 2024 versus 2025. But roughly 50-50 in terms of the budget covering those 2 years. So somewhere in the $24 million range next year. We are planning to issue bonds in the first quarter of next year. So that will be included in the budget as well. You will start to see some bond activities on your agenda tracker coming up for October. So we are definitely getting ready for that process early next year. Again, GCP Park, $6.5 million next year. Vehicle and equipment replacements, $2.7 million capital budget for that. Utilities, don't have a lot of details here. Again, we'll come back in a couple weeks for that, but significant capital improvement programs for utilities, $27.3 million for water, $18.3 million for sewer, 1.5 for stormwater. So again, significant programs. Transportation capital budget, $14.2 million next year. Your transportation benefit district budget is $4.3 million. Of that transportation benefit district, you saw a little bit of preview with that during the pavement state of the streets address. 2.8 million going towards overlay, 1.5% going towards sidewalk repair.
That doesn't include any grants that we may receive? Federal dollars?
Well, that's just the expenditure side. We do have a number of grants that will work into the funding side. In terms of the requests that came to the city manager, these are all still being looked at. We have 16 positions that have been requested by our departments, 12 of which come from the general fund, 3 positions from our utilities, and 1 from the equipment rental fund. Again, we're still looking at these and making final decisions on these positions, but really illustrates the really high need of service out there. We do have a budget shortfall, so as we are putting the final touches on the budget in terms of getting it balanced, we're definitely looking at limited capacity for new initiatives, and we're really going to focus on sustaining and maintaining the service levels that we have been providing. So the balancing effort. So we started with a beginning deficit. This deficit was calculated after the initial revenue projections. Also included our first look at labor projections. So this was a projection we put together in early August, maybe the first week of August. So we started our process thanks for the assist, Shannon, if you're working behind the scenes. We started with a $4.2 million deficit. Revenues were projected at that time at $63.1 million, expenditures at $67.4 million. Since that time, we had meetings with our departments. The city manager made some initial request decisions. We had additional refinement to our revenues, mostly related to our interfund revenue projections. So those are primarily engineering services. So our engineers are a general fund function, but we charge out fees to the utilities, the transportation department, to the parks department. So we made those calculations. We also identified one-time reserves for some capital requests. And we are now sitting at a $2.7 million deficit. Revenues at almost $75 million, expenditures at $77.5 million. So that is where we're at today, $2.7 million deficit. So we know that we're going to have to use reserves, or at least we're going to propose to you, the governing body, that we use reserves. It's going to be a combination of one-time capital improvement, capital project reserves, as well as some ongoing operations and maintenance. Where we stand now, the 2.7, I'd like to call the budget balanced, but with work to do. That's to say I want to calm fears in terms of this governing body, in terms of our employees, in terms of our citizens. So we are going to continue services. We're going to maintain service levels. But the danger of balancing your budget reserves is you're really pushing a problem into future years. We view this $2.7 million as a structural deficit. That means it's not going to solve itself. We're going to have to roll up our sleeves and address that. So we are likely to ask this council to consider balancing the budget with one-time reserves. It kind of goes against what we should be doing, but we want to be thoughtful about the process. I'm going to hand things over to the city manager here, but we're going to use the rest of this year and next year to come up with a plan. We're going to, like I said, roll up our sleeves and talk about different things we could look at for expenditures and revenues. But with that, I'll hand things over to Rick to kind of give some preliminary ideas of things that we will be considering, things we might bring back to this council.
How does this number compare to last year's number?
We didn't have a,
It was about, what, 350?
It was close to 2,
Yeah,
but
250.
a lot of that, we were funding 5 police positions. Last year with reserves, we had succession planning reserves identified. But with the voter-approved sales tax, we were able to fully fund 9 positions. So it was those 5 succession planning positions plus 4 new. So that sales tax really helped out covering that structural deficit. But this is the new.
Was it like 1.8 last time or something?
It was around there. It was close to 2.
We were starting at, yeah,
and this includes the additional 2 million we're going to receive from the sales tax?
Yes.
We're still have that.
yeah, so just to kind of reemphasize Troy's comments is that we're looking at that $2.8 million deficit, a structural deficit, meaning that if we don't look at going forward, we need to start planning out 2-3 years because that will eventually compound. And so kind of building off, well, one of the things too I want to emphasize as well is this is, this is one of those things where we're not unique either. We're seeing this in multiple cities and counties across the state as well as school districts that are struggling with revenues and expenditures and having to look at some budgeting deficits. So with that said, again, building off of what the work we did at the retreat, we're going to need to start looking at through 2025 of how we try to tackle this problem a number of ways. Again, we talked about the retreat, how do we expand revenues and resources? But first, we got to look at our expenditures as well. So some of the combination of things that we'll talk about with council at the upcoming several work sessions is looking at top to bottom line by line analysis of all of our line items in our budget and see where we can find some savings or efficiencies. There may be the look at when positions do come open from somebody leaving or retiring out of the organization, reevaluating those positions at that time for what their needs or maybe to repurpose for other priorities, efficiencies that we may need to accomplish that become more pressing, core services, for example. Looking at our travel budget as well and how do we utilize that more effectively, especially for out-of-state travel, could be another thing that could be considered. And then focusing on, again, going back to those core essential services, what are those things that we need to make sure we deliver both because of statutory requirements or the basics of local government. And then, of course, what-if scenarios in terms of what if we, our revenues continue not to keep pace with ongoing expenses, how do we look at cutting overall costs? On the other side of the coin, looking at revenue options, again, at the retreat, we did some brainstorming sessions between the director team and the city council and all those various types of revenue sources that could be considered. So we need to fine tune that and see what are those items that the council would like to explore. Also, how do we use, and this is for some of those longer term growth, because again, we're looking at this 1 to 2 year period, but also we need to start doing work to make sure we're creating more revenue opportunities 5 to 6 years out. So how do we effectively use our strategic investment fund to help support and spur additional reinvestment in the community through some economic development efforts? Also, kind of the core economic development strategies. We've heard a little bit talked about earlier with Annette from the VCB with the destination management plan. We also, with this current commercial climate, retail climate nationally, we are still starting to see some national, what used to be national A stores are starting to go dark. We got the Rite Aids, the pharmacies, they're starting to see challenges. So how do we backfill those spaces and continue to expand or keep our retail spaces full and active? But then also too, how do we try to work expansive? We're working with the tribe in Klamath Village, and that's going to take some time. But what are other opportunities that we can work with local property owners to see if there's some opportunities for reinvestment and partnerships. We also are looking at the annexation strategies. Again, that's not something that it's not a a monument again, you gotta look at the cost as well as the opportunity for revenues, but take a critical eye at that. We have some annexation study currently in progress that we should see some preliminary results in the next couple of months out of that work that we can bring back to council for some initial conversations. And then also looking at some of those councilmatic actions. Again, we talked about taxes. We talked about earlier, the mayor brought up the gambling tax and looking at expanding more opportunities for use. Also looking at utility, B&O, those type of taxes too, and see if there's opportunities there to increase some revenues that make sense. And then looking at our fee structures as well, with our civil review and permitting fees through Public Works and Community Development. So taking a holistic look at that. And then, of course, part of that councilmatic actions is looking at ultimately the recommendations that come out of the Parks Improvement Funding Group, work group. They should have some recommendations coming out in November, December that will help give the council some information to work on going into January for next year. Then, of course, we want to also protect those revenue resources that we currently have and extend them. We got the PFD opportunity for development of the RAC, but also the Transportation Benefit District. How do we ensure that we keep that alive with renewal of that program to help with our road programs as well? But of course, one of the things that we're looking at in this budget, and Troy mentioned, is some of these one-time expenses. Some of those are actually facility maintenance. We think that we need to still make those investments now because just like the structural deficit, if you defer maintenance, that just builds up and we have more of a bigger challenge to solve at a later date. And those are the points and context that the community has with city facilities as well. So there's a whole fabric of options and ways we can work at this and put the puzzle together. And that's going to be a lot of the bulk of the work we're going to see with the council at the budget workshop coming up September 24th work session. And then right now we have tentatively planned for the October 8th work session is the follow-up from the retreat and start looking at some of those other options to set up for those detailed conversations come in January.
Any questions?
Okay, just a couple more slides. I do want to kind of ground us, and I do want to acknowledge that this council, or at least past councils, have adopted fiscal policies. So I certainly want to recognize those, and this is what we're proposing is a slight departure of that, but we have good reason, and I think we have the flexibility because of our reserve level. So within this resolution, we have a chapter called Budget, Revenue, and Expenditure Policies. Just want to highlight a couple of the policies within that. This is the policy that basically says that we will match one-time sources of revenue or reserves with one-time projects. That way we don't fund ongoing expenditures and have revenues decrease and we're no longer to maintain that level of service. We have another policy that talks about the conservative nature in which we use in terms of projecting revenues, really just so that make sure that we are able to balance budgets during those times where we have declining economic environments. And then the last one I want to highlight is really gets to what we're talking about. So it talks about using beginning cash or reserves to balance the budget, and it really should be an unusual circumstance in which we do that. And I certainly think that applies. It allows us to be thoughtful in what we propose and don't overreact in those cases. But we do have that safety valve, thankfully, because of all those savings that we have. So I want to talk just a little bit about the available reserves that we haven't inputted into the budget yet. This is how we're going to get to the 2.7. We do have what I don't have listed there as actually it's $3 million now for a budget policy implementation reserve. That is to help us kind of bridge these moments. But we also have these reserves available. We have 2 reserves related directly to our public safety area. We're able to repurpose our police succession planning reserve because the new sales tax is covering those positions now. The new sales tax is also covering the cost of our mobile outreach team. So those are 2 reserves that we currently have that we could use for other purposes. We do have a rapid response team reserve that we'll use for operations. We have a reserve that'll help us pay for our body worn and fleet camera program. We also have a little over $500,000 for energy conservation projects that we're going to be using. And we have a whole number of reserves for capital improvements, capital repairs, so we're certainly going to propose that we utilize those.
Just real quick, on the previous slide. So just so that I'm clear, repurposing mobile outreach team reserves, right? That doesn't mean anybody loses their job.
No.
We have,
We no longer need those reserves to fund those positions. The sales tax is not funding those, so it frees up these
Just
reserves.
reserves for that particular fund.
we set aside reserve for that fund, but now it's being paid by
And
another.
they're cutting
Yeah.
employees.
Yeah, we have permanent funding now for
Which,
those.
just to reiterate that, those funds came in right at the right time because we're running down to the last year and sometimes half a year of reserves left to fund those positions. But it was good timing for the Prop 1 initiative.
What does the energy conservation reserves refer to?
Like the LED lights.
Yeah, those, they're pretty flexible, so it started off with our carbon reduction plan a number of years ago,
Yeah.
maybe as high as 10 years ago. It's been a long while, and that's slowly just kind of evolved, but we've been adding to this reserve where we can. If we have those year-end savings, we understand it's a council priority, so it's usually one of the first areas that we try to replenish with year-end savings. So it's, right now, we're using it primarily for the PSC rebate, the appliance rebate. It funds that. Currently, we have $200,000 in our budget for that, so that's where it's primarily going currently.
Okay. It's not going to affect the rebate program as such?
No, we'll be able to fund that again next year.
Okay.
In fact, I think we have some grant funds.
Yeah, we're
that-
also got some HERE grant dollars coming in this year as well to help continue that program.
I'm not sure I have a question, but we ran out of those funds, right? We had allocated however much money, was it $200,000, and they were expended.
For
Because it was a
2024,
very
yeah.
popular program, but we've got $500,000 sitting in reserves. And we got a grant, which was great, but at what point would we otherwise have shifted the reserve funds into the incentive program? That could have been a mid-year budget amendment, right?
We expended a little bit more than the 200,000 this last year, so we did a budget amendment, the 2024 budget amendment, to realize some of those dollars go into that program, and then looking forward to this upcoming budget year, again, reappropriating some additional dollars for climate action initiatives.
Yeah, I think we ended up with about 316,000, I think that we, for '24. We could certainly look at making that 300,000, but we also want to, kind of take a look at that grant we received too in terms of supplementing that, so.
I'm all for spending grant money first, don't get me wrong.
So just kind of closing comments, the big questions, going forward is, in terms of revenues, is what can we sustain? We have slowing construction levels, as you saw, 7.1% increases, looking at the rolling 12 months, down to 1.5 for the current year. Through August of 2024, building permit revenues are down about 430,000. Plan check fees are down about 352,000. These are all indicators of future activity, so we're expecting a decrease at this point. Sales tax, as you've seen, we've had 3 down months in a row. We'll see what happens going forward, but the question looking at that trend is, are we slowing down, or will that start to retreat in terms of actually decreases the sales tax? Of course, on the expenditure side, it's again all about labor. 2/3 of our general fund budget go to labor, an increase in the general fund of just over 9%, $3.6 million, and that's without including any of those 16 positions. So we're already significant increases. Also related to expenditures, it's what is going to happen with inflation. It's been going in the right direction. I think inflation is released tomorrow.
Yep, 5:30.
Tomorrow, so like at 5:30, 4:30 in the morning. I'm not going to wake up at 4:30, but as soon as I wake up and come to work, I'll take a look at that. But I think we're going to receive both the national and the Seattle-Tacoma Bellevue factors tomorrow, so we'll see what that holds for us. Next week, of course, we have the Federal Reserve meeting on the 17th and 18th. The market is fully priced in a 0.25% decrease of the rate. I've heard rumblings of a jumbo decrease, which is probably 0.5%. Your guess is as good as mine. So, like always, in terms of when I provide you projections, there's news that's coming that's probably going to prove me wrong. So, probably by next week even.
Troy, I had just a real quick question on,
Yeah.
just a couple of slides ago, so I mathed it out, and it looks like, all those funds add up to like 2.4, but it brings us short of about 275, and does that, would that just come from the various reserves of capital? Is that we just make that?
We have another reserve that's $3 million for budget policy, so we have, adequate to cover the 2.7. So, yeah, it's $3 million that you're not seeing on this, on this list right here.
Well, I think that adds up to 2.4.
No, there's another reserve that I didn't list.
And there's another 3 million on top.
Yeah.
We have reserves for
That's
budget.
all right.
We're
That's
good.
how my brain works. I get it.
Yep, no, appreciate the double check. All right, so the last slide, I think, if I could catch back up with myself. So, we do think we're going to, like I said, come with a proposal that's gonna balance our budget, our operating budget with reserves. We had the body worn camera, the fleet camera reserve, energy conservation projects, rapid response team, and this is the reserve that's $3 million that wasn't listed on that previous slide. So that's really that will be our catch-all. That's where we'll make up the differences in that $3 million reserve. So with that, if you have any other additional questions, I'd be happy to entertain them. I do want to recognize Christy Wolf, Chelsea Yarwood in the audience. Somehow they stuck with me up until now, but they've been instrumental getting us to this point, and they will definitely help us get to the finish line later this year. So appreciate their help and support.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, our last agenda item is our comprehensive plan update and engagement plan. I need to go use the restroom.
You guys mind if we just take a 2-minute, 3-minute, before we get started? And, I think we can go ahead and get started. It's just we're all missing it. Yeah. So, we're just gonna take 2.5 minutes. And then you guys get started. Ah. We appreciate that. I think we can do this. You guys think you can get us out of here by 9 o'clock?
I mean, I'll talk quick.
We'll shoot for earlier,
Yeah?
but let's set that as the bar so that we can do that.
I mean, we've been here till 10, haven't we? Once or twice. It's been a while, but we'll just give city manager and the mayor a chance to get back and get you guys started. right, time's up. Let's roll. Sorry about that. Go for it.
We're good. Okay, we promised to be quick while you were all out of the room. So,
They promised to
I
get us
will,
out of here.
I will kick this off with, as you all are aware, we've been working on our comprehensive plan behind the scenes with our consultants, but a little bit in front of the scenes as well. But this is our opportunity to bring back to you some of the work that we've been doing to date. And with that, I will hand it off to Hans and Ryan.
Go ahead, Hans.
All right. Hello, I'm Hans Shepard. I'm a senior planner here. Lately been working on the comprehensive plan. I think that'll be my probably job description for the next year and a half here. But yeah, so this is going to be kind of a brief update of the initial kind of kickoff of that, some initial feedback that we've got back, and then looking forward, what our plans are as far as community outreach and engagement. And then also going to be seeking some feedback from you guys as far as where you want to plug into that, your level of involvement and what you want that to look like. So yeah, I think the only attachment that came with our packet anyways was the communication and community engagement plan, which really was divided into two different sections, one being the communication side and one being the kind of engagement side of that. The goal of this plan is really to ensure that we're inclusive and informative in our update process, and that we really ensure that we engage the community as effectively as possible and really make sure that we're reaching out to all different sections of the community and really trying to make sure that we are creating kind of community ownership in this process and also fostering kind of transparency as we move through it, so that when we get to the end that this is really viewed as a community document and a community result, community plan. But yeah, so the communication section, really this is, so it's divided up, in the plan that you have is divided up into two different sections. The communication section is really kind of the education side of things. So it's what is a comprehensive plan? What does this update process look like? What are some of the Growth Management Act requirements that we are trying to hit by doing this process? It's also kind of consistent messaging throughout. And then the engagement side is really identifying kind of a range of different strategies on how we want to reach the community, both kind of just general broad-based outreach, but then also finding ways to really reach those traditionally underrepresented groups within the planning process. So communities of color, low-income households, non or limited English-speaking, youth and young adults, renters, military personnel. These are some of the groups that we've identified that historically in our outreach efforts have been lower represented than what they may actually exist within our community. So finding ways to really make sure that we get feedback from those groups and really ensure that they feel included in that process moving throughout it. The update process is really divided into four different main phases. Right now we're in what's called the visioning phase, which is really this summer to fall period, 2024. From there, we're going to be moving into community priorities, which is where we take kind of all the feedback that we received in that initial phase and really kind of distill it down, looking for common themes, elements, consistencies between the feedback. And then moving into next year and then spring of 2025 is where we take all of that feedback that we've kind of distilled down and start working it into draft concepts, draft plans, policies, goals. And then the final plan, looking at summer 2025 is really when we're going to be kind of targeting that, moving into the later half of next year. And throughout the entirety of this process, there are going to be numerous opportunities for community engagement, community feedback, kind of confirming that what we're working on is consistent with the feedback that we received from the community. Many opportunities for the community at large to really kind of view that, what we're developing, but then also provide targeted feedback on it all the way throughout that process.
Yeah, and I'll just add, before Hans gets into what we've been learning through this first phase of our visioning process is getting back to the communications and engagement plan. This is a plan that's been vetted not only by our own internal communications staff, but certainly the Planning Commission and the Commission on Equity as well. So it comes to you kind of in its final draft form for any kind of last, like a last touch point to you all before we move forward with this. Obviously, we've been doing some early engagement. So happy to take your feedback on that. that tonight. As Hans moves through the presentation, he'll be kind of updating you on what we've already been doing, but certainly welcoming your feedback tonight on anything that we might have missed along the way.
And the next couple slides go into a little bit more detail on each one of these different phases, but yeah. Phase one of this is the visioning. It's currently where we're at right now in the process. That actually started with some visioning workshops, one of which that we did with you guys. That was actually that Mentimeter process where we asked you to arrange different questions and got feedback on that. We also took that same questionnaire to the Youth Council and the Planning Commission, got feedback from both of those groups as well. We've also already attended a couple community events, the Barbecue Fest, and then also Cops, Cars, and Kids. We identified those ones as kind of early opportunities to really engage with the community. They're youth and family friendly, and they do tend to draw kind of a Lacey specific crowd at those events versus some of the other ones that are more regional based. So looking forward, we're also going to be talking about some events that are really kind of traditionally draw more of a Lacey specific crowd, so that when we do go out to the community, those efforts are really most efficient and utilized in that sense. And then actually moving through this month, we're currently in the process of developing a project-specific website, and then also our broad-scale survey that's going to be running really kind of from now until probably close to the end of the year. And then these are a couple photos here from the Barbecue Fest, and then also the Cops, Cars, and Kids from that engagement that we've done so far. From those two events, I did want to include just some high-level takeaways. Barbecue Fest, we received 68 unique comments, and then we also had just kind of more conversations with people as they checked out our booth, and just kind of more organic conversations in that way, face-to-face, staff communicating with the community at large. So one of the questions that we asked at that first one was, what's your vision for Lacey's future? And I bulleted 4 of kind of the main themes that we got out of that. One that we weren't initially expecting was actually had to do a lot with transportation, but then there's also some of those usual suspects in there, including the pool and splash park that we tend to hear a lot about. And then we also heard about affordable housing, and then healthcare, hospitals, and mental health. If we were to kind of group all of the different types of comments that we received, those were some of the primary buckets that we heard feedback on. And then Cops, Cars, and Kids, there we actually had 111 comments. We also had a lot of conversations with participants in that event. Given this one was a little bit more kid-focused, but again, we actually still heard a lot of transportation-related comments, so increased connectivity, both regional and at local scales. Again, we heard about the splash pad or some kind of pool and interactive activities within parks. We also heard about trees and natural settings, and then affordable home and ownership and housing options. Yeah?
So it sounded like you said increased connectivity is transportation related.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so it's different transportation networks, whether or not that's sidewalks or paths through neighborhoods or public transit, making sure that it connects to other transit systems. So it was a range of different transportation comments, but that was kind of the bucket, if you will, that best describes the type of feedback that we heard around that subject. We also heard about a recommendation for a roller coaster. I don't know if that's transportation or parks, but we can figure that one out later. And this is just kind of some plugging for a couple upcoming events that we're targeting, that we're planning on attending. One is Children's Day on October 5th at Huntermer Park. We also have Winterfest on November 2nd, and that one's actually put on by the Lacey South Sound Chamber. And then looking into the early part of next year, we have the Lacey Cultural Celebration. So those are all events that we plan to be at. Invite you guys to attend in any capacity that you're interested in, and we can send updates as we get closer to those as well. This is a quick slide I did want to include. It should look familiar. It is actually that visioning exercise that I talked about. So we asked you guys, we also asked the Youth Council and the Planning Commission about what blend of outreach and engagement you guys thought was going to be the right balance. What we see is that you guys landed pretty squarely in the middle of all of them. So we are going to seek to do that, but there is a little bit of a lean towards attending events over hosting events. And then there's a pretty even balance between in-person versus virtual and online. So the strategies that we're about to run through really kind of are intended to meet all of those kind of target goals as far as the types of outreach and when and where we're going to reach out to the community. So moving into phase two, this is really the community priorities, and this has to do with kind of that funneling process. So we started really broad, open-ended questions, and then take all that feedback and then are kind of funneling it down into common themes, different commonalities that we hear within the feedback that we hear from the community. This is where we're going to be launching a map-based survey targeting local communities. We're actually currently working on that right now. Conducting outreach through community partners, so relying on not just our own outreach platforms that we have available to us, but connecting with other community groups that are better at reaching other parts of our community that we sometimes struggle to reach, reaching out to our local education institutions, trying to partner with them, get awareness about the process and opportunities to provide feedback in it into our schools. And then local business outreach was another idea. So potentially doing things like lunch and learns or other events that are really kind of reaching that business community as part of this process. From there, once we get that feedback, again, we're going to be funneling it down even tighter, getting into actually the writing of the goals and policies. We're targeting probably here in this room, City Hall open house in spring 2025. Which is going to be kind of a big collection of everything we've heard to date, where we're going, some initial takeaways, findings, guidance, and that's really going to serve as an opportunity for the community to come in and say, yes, this is what we were telling you, or no, this is actually what we meant by that. So it's another opportunity to really kind of check in with the community and make sure that we're on the right track. We'll also have, as Ryan has mentioned in the past, one of the world's largest front desk counters. So potentially putting that to use, having some kiosks, some kind of comprehensive plan related stations out in actually the hallway out here. So when people come through that they have the opportunity to actually learn more about that process and provide feedback. Really kind of meeting people where they are is a big emphasis of this. So not making them have to do extra steps or make extra effort in order to participate in this process. And then we talked about launching the website. This is actually the phase where that website will convert from more of a information library of all of the information that we've heard and all the documents to more of actually starting to turn into what that final product is going to look like, which is going to be, for the most part, a digital comprehensive plan. And then continuing to do a lot of that outreach that we've talked about.
So this is the plan for our outreach and communications, not the plan to update our actual comprehensive plan, which is a lot more in depth than that, right? Mm-hmm. This is just that outreach portion of this.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And then the final phase is the final plan, and that's where kind of everything comes together in that final product, which I had mentioned is going to be that web-based document. There will be printable PDF versions of that available for those that are interested in that, but we are really kind of making a big push to make this plan as accessible as possible, simplify a lot of it, get a lot of the interesting components of what a comprehensive plan is up front, so people don't have to dig for it, make it readily kind of accessible and findable. So people can kind of engage with the part of the plan that they're interested in, but they don't have to go through the entirety of it to find maybe those one or two topics that are really kind of their top of mind or what's interesting to them. And then I believe this is actually my last slide. So looking forward as far as frequencies, the frequency of briefings that we're going to be doing with you guys, we wanted to connect at this point in time. Right now, our recommendation is to kind of maintain a quarterly update process through around spring of 2025. But at that point in time, that's really kind of where we start getting down into the writing of the draft policies, the goals, really kind of scripting the language that is actually going to be in that plan. And that we anticipate is going to require more participation from you guys, more guidance. So looking at kind of ways in order to kind of boost that participation from you guys as we move through that springtime and into that kind of final drafting plan document. One idea that we came up with was actually having 4 p.m. meetings in advance of regularly scheduled meetings that we can have that are purely dedicated to the comprehensive plan, where we can kind of get into the details of these. And we can divide that up either by topic, so transportation one day, housing the next, that kind of thing. Or we can divide it up as it makes sense with different areas or focus topics. But yeah, this is our last slide, and we're hoping to get kind of feedback on that.
Are we going to dive in this comprehensive plan update? Are we going to look at our current zoning and any of it and update our zoning?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have really kind of a map-based survey that we're developing. But through that platform, we can actually also ask targeted questions about our zoning, and kind of, we can ask survey questions, but in a map-based sense. So not only can people provide just general comments, but they can actually kind of pinpoint that location they're talking about. Okay. And we're going to use that tool to really kind of look at our zoning, and it takes a lot of the abstract kind of connecting comments to specific locations, that process out of it, so that people can really kind of provide that targeted feedback, which will be a great tool.
Yeah.
And I know Ryan wanted to jump in on
Yeah,
that too.
and by look at zoning, I think looking at zoning can mean different things to different people. And so I just wanted to manage expectations around looking at zoning.
Are do you not predict that we're going to do major changes to our zoning?
To our zoning code, probably not. We will do the legislative requirements that we're required to do through our different bills that have been adopted. Yes, absolutely, we'll get those done. But are we going to do a wholesale adoption of a new zoning
Not in a
code?
comprehensive plan. When would we do that?
So can I add a little bit of a refinement to that? So we will look at the land use designations of the city as a whole through this process. Look at our housing capacity, our housing targets, our commercial square footage, our industrial spaces, make sure we're meeting our jobs needs, do that analysis and adjust based on that. Okay. Then the next phase, which would be after we actually adopt a comprehensive plan as a city, we can get into the details of the development standards on how that will get built out. Do we need to change the specifics of this particular zone that we identified? Maybe we collapse some zones, maybe we expand zones right through that first process, then we go and we fix those specific development standards. But that would be looking at 2026, most likely after we adopt the comprehensive plan as a whole next phase of all these efforts.
So what we did with the neighborhood commercial zone definitions was a great deal more in-depth than what we're going to be able to do for every zoning definition in the city in the next year and a half. That makes sense, because that took about a year and a half, and that was just one section of the code.
Yeah, and one of our obligations under the Growth Management Act is, once we adopt the policies within this comprehensive plan, is that we ensure our development standards are consistent. And we have to start with adopting the policies so that we can follow up with that consistency analysis and amendments as necessary. But we need that a policy set first, so we can use that as guidance.
Yeah, no, besides that policies is what's going to define what's going to happen within those zones.
And do we look at our urban growth area and the zoning within our urban growth area and make recommendations onto the full county, or is that just completely separate? We're not even looking at urban growth area.
So the way joint planning works for us is that the city does the long-range planning for our urban growth area. So we actually set forth the comprehensive plan vision for our urban growth area and the zoning code associated with that. The county is tasked in coming up behind and essentially adopting the work that we have already done. Okay. So we lead the way when it comes to our urban growth area, not the other way around.
Okay. So does that dovetail into like the Martin Way corridor study where and so that it all becomes?
Yeah. Yep.
Quick question on your schedule from visioning to final plan. The draft plan, spring of 2025, and you said at that point you were hoping with the outreach to truth it with public reaction to it. And I mean, if you got a strong public reaction, a negative reaction, is spring to summer enough time to make whatever fixes the community wants?
But we're going to be reaching out consistently throughout the entirety of this process. That's going to be one of our big deliverables back to the community, but that's not to say that there won't be many opportunities leading up to that and in advance of that to participate at whatever desired level any community member would want to. So that's going to be one big event that we host, but that's not to say that there aren't numerous opportunities to participate in advance of that. So every one of those is going to be an opportunity to course correct if that is something that becomes necessary.
And also, I'll just also say that, you know, our December 31st, 2025 is our mandated update deadline. And so we're always having to work back from that deadline, you know, given the amount of time that we have, and to be able to get it done. And so I think this is a reasonable schedule. There may be some adjustments one way or the other that we need to make, but Hans brings up a really good point that by that time, it shouldn't necessarily be a surprise to the community what ends up in the draft plan, goals and policies, those kinds of things. It should be a affirmation of, you know, we get it right versus wait, this is what we're talking about. So at least knock on wood at this point, that's, you know, that's the way our schedule reads, is that at that point, you know, we will be confirming, you know, with the community that we got it right versus, you know, starting over again at that point.
Right.
And we'll be carrying forward the feedback that we received at those earlier phases and have those available. So we'll be able to kind of point to, this is the guidance that we got and this is what we did with it. So if there is a disconnect, we'll be able to catch that early.
Councilor?
Make sure it's, we're not just paying lip service to accepting feedback and then adapting it into the plan.
We can also amend those policies after that feedback and make tweaks based on what we hear again at that phase. And we'll retain that flexibility throughout that process as we listen to the community. Yeah.
Based on this engagement plan, no part of this draft plan will be a shot in the dark. It'll be built off of the feedback we're getting from the community.
Absolutely.
And two pieces of feedback, one on the engagement plan, or maybe a question, and then one just on the overall comprehensive plan development process. We're trying to reach folks that are hard to reach, right? And that's good, because we want to get all the voices that are here as a part of this plan. Are we going to churches? Is that a part of our plan for engagement? I liked that the youth council said we need to be going to more community events. And we know that we have some local religious organizations that, you know, people of color congregate at. They are congregations, right? Like we've got Korean language churches, we've got churches that a lot of black folks attend. Those are some of the people that we have such a hard time hearing from in other places because maybe they're not the ones that take surveys.
Yeah.
I'll just ask if you, as a request, if you do have any good points of contact with those churches, we would welcome those. We did, you know, speak directly with the Commission on Equity on this and ask them for some of those contacts, and haven't received that yet. So if you do have any of those contacts, that would be super helpful for us.
So this would be my recommendation, and obviously the council needs to make this decision. I'm not a big fan of a 4 p.m. start. What I'd rather do is meet quarterly, like we talk about, but have that be a special meeting where we're meeting out in the public and engaging the public. For example, at a church congregation, that we have a special meeting at once a quarter for that. We have another special meeting in conjunction with North Thurston Public Schools that we're bringing in, and so I'd rather have special meetings that we're engaging out in the community where we're talking about, but we also have the opportunity for the public to engage with us and meet them where they're at, than just meet here an hour, 2 hours early and try to do it that way. I'd rather have those I'd rather do the meetings out in the community.
And that, you could always have special meetings with public forums to create that opportunity for direct feedback from the public. The idea and the concept behind these workshops was to act as a deep dive for the council to get into what the feedback, what those issues are within a particular element or specific topic, and kind of get that deeper understanding to help give direction and vision. But you can still have that opportunity for the public forums and that interaction with the public too. I would expect.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I jumped in there, but come to any and all, please, if you want to be there. And then back to the workshop concepts, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that goes into each and every one of these elements. Transportation has a lot of engineering studies and analyses that we'll be doing. Our climate element is all new with specific research and background that's going to go into some of these policies. And this is the forums where we might be able to have some of those detailed conversations with you, provide some of that technical side, as well as the public feedback side and the policy side in specific categories, so we can use you all as a sounding board in terms of how we're drafting those policies moving forward.
Versus bringing a finished product at the
Yep.
end and then say, oh, you need more time to look at, this is, you're
I'm just
building
saying,
the sausage.
as we're being updated through this process, having those meetings here, I don't think is quite as impactful as we have this meetings out in the community if possible. If that's what we're gonna try to do.
I mean, I'm guessing that they are gonna be out in the community all the time. And then they're gonna come back and brief us on what they hear. So that's the difference between the two meetings, if I'm following.
And then the council can attend these open meetings or help, have special meetings out in the public to have that direct listening to the public as well. And the public could attend those workshops if they would like to hear the conversation and deeper dives.
And don't forget about our planning commission, who's gonna spend a lot of hours on this project and provide us with a lot of valuable
And that was,
feedback.
I was gonna bring up, there's a few of us that were on the planning commission and went through these comprehensive plans, and there's a lot to it. It's so complicated, and there's so many, you get down to the weeds, and so, I think any engagement's good.
Okay. Well, I guess we still have to figure out how we're going to fit in this extra check-in times with the council.
Maybe a little hybrid, maybe a little bit of both,
Well, you don't have to necessarily have a decision. We don't have to put this idea before, because that's one of the comments we've heard over the last year and a half, 2 years or so, of how you get more involved in the comp plan process and understanding some of those issues. So we could still refine that, and the council can think about it.
Let's think about it, and what's the best way to do that.
I mean, I speak only for myself, but a 4 PM start time on the day of a council meeting works well for me.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, we have reached out to the clerk's office, and we are exploring other options as well. And we're talking about, halfway through next year, so we have some time to kind of fine tune that and tweak that to what makes sense. But right now, this is kind of our idea as far as how to really accomplish the number of meetings that we're gonna need with you guys and the amount of feedback that we're hoping to receive from you guys.
Yeah, 4 o'clock works for me too. I think it's a good idea. I think it's going to allow us to be a little more thoughtful about it than just trying to react at a regular council
Yeah,
meeting.
I guess we'll just have to think that through, because if we're gonna meet for 2 hours before, or not, right, then go have our council meeting. I'm very cognizant of that. I think that's an awfully long meeting. We're gonna have to figure something out, either a dinner break or something.
Well, it'd be a focus on an hour workshop, 4 to 5, and then have an opportunity to transition from that to the council, is what the idea behind that schedule was.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the function is similar to a committee movement schedule.
Do you have something, Nick? No?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm pretty flexible with what we do, so I'm really, whatever's in the best interest of the rest of the council, I'm okay with.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Did we lose Lenny?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that, we have reached the end of our agenda, so without objection, I'm going to call this meeting adjourned, and as always, you keep it classy, Lacey.